Welcome, everyone. This is the weekly session of the market update. Today, I'm delighted to have a special guest, Christy, out of the Boston area. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a combination of the market that's happening in the Bay Area. I'll give you the latest figures and some of the latest updates. Christy will also be sharing, because I'm also curious of how things are either similar or different in her area. And then, of course, let's make this interactive. So if you have any questions or anything that comes up at any time, feel free to write it in the comments, and then we'll be able to answer it whenever we get a chance to. Christy, you want to do a little bit of intro on your end?
Okay, yeah, sure, definitely. Hey, everybody, my name is Christy C., and I'm here in the Boston area. So I've been doing real estate for about 10 years and all in the greater Boston area. And throughout the years, my business also expanded beyond brokerage. So besides real estate brokerage business, I also do asset management and currently managing over 20 million in terms of, assets here around Boston area, and as well as development. So that ranges from, short-term flips to also new construction and condo conversions, etc. So it's been a very interesting market, where we're in right now, and I'm delighted to be here, and also I'm looking forward to learn from you, Spencer, as far as what's going on in your market and what you're doing as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I know we have the data pull up on your end. Why don't you go and share your market updates, maybe it looks like you have some information for possibly the pre-shelter and post. Love to hear about the state of the market on your end, and I'll go over on my end after.
Yeah, sure. So in the greater Boston area, we are kind of divided into different submarkets. So I would say that, for the purpose of today's call, I picked out 4 different neighborhoods. Those are neighborhoods that I think that everybody is really familiar with if you're actually from Boston. So I picked out Cambridge, Somerville, kind of grouped those 2 cities together to compare some of the numbers. I also picked Allston and Brighton, and, these 2 towns are close together to compare some of the numbers in those markets. So for the ones that are not from Boston, so Cambridge and Somerville, that's where MIT and Harvard is situated, and also in Brighton, that's where Boston College and Boston University is. So it's I think that overall, looking at some of the numbers, it's still a little bit too early to tell the difference between post and, I always say pre-COVID-19 and, where we're at right now. Because, it's, I would say probably it's mid-March when we started the kind of the shutdown. Is that kind of when you guys started as well in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I think it's likely the exact same date. It looks like March 17 is actually the date where the shelter was enforced.
Yeah, so Massachusetts is March 13th, actually. That's the date that we declared. Yeah, so I mean, it's very similar. So it's about a month. And, usually it takes about, if the buyer's doing mortgage, it takes about 30 to 45 days to close. So a lot of the, if I'm looking at data, for the past month, I feel like there's still a lot of closings that are happening actually from, pre-COVID-19. So I think that to really see some of the market data that happened during the COVID-19, we need to probably wait for another month or so, I would say. But I'm still seeing some numbers, that are changing for the property that are going under agreement during this time. So, yeah, let me see if I can share my screen here. Can you guys see it?
Yeah, we see the Excel spreadsheet that you have.
Okay. Oh. Hold on one second. Okay, you see it right here, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So this first spreadsheet, I compiled together all the numbers for properties, single family, condominium, multifamily in Cambridge and Somerville that are on the market currently. So that's on the market right now, this moment, within kind of the past month. So I mean, there's still quite a lot on the market, especially I would say in, I mean, for us, and this is a lot. I don't know how to compare to like the Bay Area, but
Yeah.
in those two cities, I would say there's still a decent amount of properties on the market. So when a buyer comes out to, make their selections, there's still a decent amount. The majority, they fall in, I would say, in between here. I would say between 600K to about like 1.5. That's kind of where the current, listings are in the Somerville, Cambridge area.
Mhm.
And let me jump onto this spreadsheet here. This is for Brighton and Alston. So Brighton, Alston, like you see the price range is actually much lower than Cambridge and Somerville. And I would say right about here is where the majorities are. So that's between like, 400K to about like just under $1 million. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that, there's definitely less in Alston, Brighton than Cambridge and Somerville. And historically, it has been like that as well. There's just a lot of investors that are holding on their properties in Somerville and, in Alston, Brighton. And the second one is the pending. So I think that this is where I think that we can probably see some current data as far as, okay, how many number of listings they went under agreement during the past month in Cambridge and Somerville, and in what price range the majority fall into, right? So we're looking at the bulk, it would be probably about here. So between 500 to 1.5, including the multifamilies. So let's see here. If we look at the ones went pending in Cambridge and Somerville over the past month, there's 97 properties. So there's still a decent amount of activity that's going on.
Got it.
So this is the properties that went pending for Alston and Brighton. And it's a lot less. There's 20 properties. But that's also because, when we review this data here, there's less properties on the market total in Alston, Brighton. But there's still activity. There's still activity. So that's, we can see that for sure.
Got it.
Let's see here. And then I pulled other data here for the ones that are sold. But then again, like I mentioned, the ones that are sold, I feel like this is a lot of it's like, pre-COVID-19. So there's still a decent amount of that are sold. I would say the bulk is probably around this pack here. Number of listings. Yeah, there's still like, in the Cambridge and Somerville market, 111 that are sold in the past month. And this one, a lot less for Alston, Brighton. Again, is because it's still very low inventory in Alston, Brighton. And I would say the majority is in this pack, 16 that are sold. Yeah, much. I think that Alston and Brighton, there's still a shortage of supply. Like, you can count with your fingers how many listings there are, how many in Alston, Brighton area. So, yeah. I think that, with the lack of, inventory or new properties on the market, there's still a decent market for sale. If, say, for example, if I'm looking at this data here, someone wants to sell a condo in Alston, Brighton, I still think that there's a decent amount of market for it. There's still a decent amount of demand. Funny story I wanted to share. So in Cambridge, right? So recently, this week, I submitted an offer for a client, and this client, I'm thinking, wow, this client has got it. We got this one, right? It's a 1-bedroom condo in Cambridge, it's very close to MIT, and it's priced at 550K. And my client's all cash. We got proof of funds. I'm like, okay, we got this. Who can come up with the cash offer, right, at this moment? But the thing is that we got 3 competing offers, and the rest are all cash. So I was like, wow, interesting. So this is still a multiple offer situation in Cambridge for a 1-bedroom condo, and there's still cash offers out there. I was really surprised. The listing agent was surprised too. So it went actually over asking. So, yeah. I think that, overall of course, I just compared like 4 different markets here in Boston. I think it really depends on where where the property fall into in terms of the submarket, and also how many other comparisons are there, how something similar to the property that are sold. Is there anything else out there? Is your property like unique enough, or the pricing is good enough and is also showable enough to actually make it work? But I still think in Boston here, there's still a lot of demand, and I still think that for a listing, as long as in the right price range and it's easy to show, there's still a healthy demand.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah. And I think the last ones that I have here is the price change. So this is Cambridge and Somerville. So one thing that comes up a lot too is that people are asking, well, are people lowering the price? What's going on with the price of real estate right now?
Right.
So I think that again, it's also location dependent as well, and I think it's also dependent on the seller's motivation as well. So here in Cambridge and Somerville, I would say this is probably the bulk of it.
Mm-hmm.
So price change. So there's actually only very few in the past month that there's price changes. So there's one here, 3 here, and 2 here. So the ones, the 3 and 2, they're all like, in the $1 million range. So, and this is a price change for Allston Brighton. There's only 1. So I think that right now, I still don't see, at least in the Boston area, in these 4 markets, that people are, decreasing their price.
Yeah.
So,
it doesn't seem that much pressure on them at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Is there anything else you want to share, or I can go on my end and you can see?
Why don't you go on your end?
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Stop sharing. Okay. So our end is a little bit different. I'm able to start seeing some more information related to pre and post. So on my last video, I showed this data, except now it's extended further out because of the time that we're in now, kind of mid-April. But the biggest things that I would know is there was a significant drop in listings from pre-shelter and post. This is a substantial drop. As you can see, it's about 60% drop of new listings. That week as well significantly dropped out of the market altogether, and they're just waiting until the shelter is lifted. As you can see, this is a week by week trend, and that week 119 dropped out that week. However, over the course of the following time, you can see the number of listings are pretty low, substantially lower than normal, especially this last week. There's only 47 new listings versus just 1 month ago, there's 100 more. But one of the things that I took notice of is you can also see the number that is contingent. That number in terms of a ratio has also dropped versus the pending figures. When it first was announced, there was so much uncertainty that people didn't know, 1, if they should even make offers, but 2, what kind of contingencies that they should have. But as you can see, as we go further and further on, people are pretty confident about their own situation, whether it's from a job or from a lending perspective. And so the amount that goes pending versus contingent, that ratio is also very different. You can also notice that the listings that are canceled, expired, withdrawn, that amount is also much lower. Really, if the people wanted to withdraw, they would have done that already. So now these are people that want to sell, and we also have a lot more firm information in terms of the policies that we'll go over later, right, in terms of how do we even show property. So there's a lot more clarity because when it was first announced, there was so much unknown. We couldn't even go see properties, and then over time we can, but there's limitations. So those are the things that I have noticed here. This is San Mateo County. Just like in Boston, there's many different counties. Here we have several main ones. I would say San Mateo County is one of the strongest counties in all of the Bay Area. It's just one of the strongest for various reasons, mainly due to location. So it's one of the strongest. One of the things I'll point out from this is we have a very significant inventory shortage. As you can see, the number of new listings are so low, but the properties are going contingent and pending. this figure is extremely close, right? I mean, basically any new listing is getting taken up. So you can see the percentages of how many are actually going contingent or pending versus how many listings. So we have this very tight shortage right now. So here's a chart that actually shows the months of inventory. We're dropping now to slightly above 1 month of inventory, which is, if you look at the chart over the last several years, we're getting to very, very low inventory levels. So that makes it very difficult for buyers to be able to find properties that they like. And at the same time, what does that mean from a price perspective? San Mateo County, this report is based off of residential, so it's not multifamily, but it's single family. It's a combination of single family, townhome, and condos. You can see the average price point now in April, which is actually a very different chart than it was previously. It's getting close to it's around $1.8, $1.85 million on average. And this is a mix of single family, condo, and townhouses all merged together. The chart I had last week, it was interesting because it actually showed it was a dip. But this is kind of what I expected over time is prices are actually continuing to rise. Now, it may be modest, but they are continuing to rise because we have such a tight amount of inventory, and people are starting to get more and more confident that the worst is over for many, whether it's their job situation is over. The stock market has certainly rebounded significantly for those that have not, checked in. I mean, it's gone up very sharply. I believe it's like 15, 20% up in a very short period. So that has also an impact as to prices. But the interesting part is there's significant new listings coming on the market. The inventory is very limited for that reason because the buyer pool is also increasing, and then prices are now reflecting that has actually been increasing. And I suspect this will be likely the same, if not modest increases moving forward until really things are opened up. So that's what's happening here in the Bay Area.
Okay.
All right. So this is the market update. So love to hear on your end in terms of like what is the protocol, right? Like how do you go see houses? What is it like in your area? And then I'll share kind of the scenario and the steps here in the Bay Area.
Spencer, I actually have a question. So in this county that you said, San Mateo County, right? So is it mostly single family here? Is it mostly like owner occupants? Can you tell me a little bit more about like these numbers?
Yeah.
What type of property are they? Are they like, more investment or owner occupant?
In terms of the mix, there are definitely a lot of people that have multiple properties in San Mateo County. So the amount of equity that people have in these properties are very high, especially because of the rise of prices over the last decade. There's a very high amount, but I wouldn't say its majorities are like landlord renter type of situations. Most of them are going to be individual buyers that want to move. One from a job perspective is closer to their work, but also potentially from a school perspective.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's the breakdown of this area.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the mix, it's going to be mostly single family because this area is considered an older part of the Bay Area. So there's not that much new construction coming up either, and it's very limited. It's very limited because there's no land for them to build. So most of it is going to be ones that have been built in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, here in Boston area, like the four submarkets that I compared it with, it's actually, I would say there's a very heavy concentration in terms of, multifamily and also condos, and especially for investors. So I think that it will be very interesting, for us to take a look at, okay, maybe like for the next month or so, how does that differ in terms of property prices that are more geared towards like investors and also like, single family for owner occupants. I think that I'm curious to kind of taking a look at that to see, okay, from, an investment perspective, how are the prices of multifamilies have changed or not changed and versus like the single family. I think that'll be a really interesting comparison
Yeah.
next time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we mentioned about the local protocols for showings, right? Especially
Yeah.
for property owners who's contemplating right now, hey, should they be putting up this market for sale or should they be waiting? And here in Boston, I mean, the guideline is that, you should not be doing open houses. And but I do see that there's a lot of real estate agents that come up with really creative ideas. So one of them actually was a Zoom open house. So
Okay.
yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So she made the announcement that, okay, during this time, like, Sunday from 10 to 12, this is the Zoom meeting ID, and anybody can, jump on, and she would just be at the property and, going over with her phone and her camera, and we could still do open house that way. And or I've seen people where, say, okay, we're going to do a showing this time, but you had to tell me when you're coming, so this way that she can space out each buyer that's coming in, and make sure not everybody's coming in all at once. And of course, everybody's wearing, like, gloves and masks. So that's what I'm seeing right now. I mean, definitely it's a much easier showing when the house is vacant.
Yeah.
Sometimes when the seller is there, they step out, but that's still a little tricky because you don't know who's here and what they touch and all that.
Yeah.
So I've seen, people have the most success still with, vacant properties, I would say. I mean, there's a lot of requests. I feel like, people would be saying, hey, do you have a video for this? Do you have, 3D floor plan for this? There's a lot of inquiries on some of the properties that I have, but there's not a lot of action. Yeah. That's
interesting. Yeah. Here is very different. You cannot do open houses, period. No Zoom open houses either. That's not a legit option. Number one. Number two, you can't, within our MLS, they actually have prohibited and not even allowed you to be able to post like those open house schedules, right? 1 to 4, Saturday and Sunday.
So not even vacant properties? You can't even do that?
Correct.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, right. So you can't do that either. So it sounds like it's significantly more locked down than you guys. So even properties that have a tenant or a property that is owner occupied, they can't even go see it. There's no stepping in and out either, right? You can't go see it, period, unless the guidelines change. So that's why the inventory here in the Bay Area is so much lower, right? Because they can't go see it in person until, like I said, until things actually come, the whole guidelines change. So it's really only vacant properties that are being sold. Generally, unless, like, I have a condo that just hit the market today, there's a tenant, but condos are a little bit easier because there's only so many configurations of a condo. It's not like as huge, or there's not as many variances versus like a single family house. So condos are a little bit easier. And then so what we did was we had virtual staging, we had photos, I did a video walkthrough, but they can't go see that until either the tenants are moved out or like I said, the guidelines change. So it's much stricter here for sure. So why people are doing kind of a wait and see, why a majority of people are doing a wait and see, especially if they live there.
So do you see that people, placing an offer with the contingency upon seeing it?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah. So it depends, right? It's because of how competitive it is. They may not even have that opportunity to write that contingency because it's still not a very strong offer, because they can back out just by saying, oh, I didn't like it, once I actually go see it. So the offer isn't very strong. And so it just depends on the situation. There's plenty of offers, as you can see, the ones that are going pending. There's no contingencies on these because they look at the photos, they look at the video tours, and they're like, all right, I'm good. We're going to make a non-contingent offer. We're going to take this off the market. So it just depends on the situation. But sometimes, you have no choice because you don't have any other offers, but also they are adamant in seeing it. So it's case by case.
Okay. I mean, do you have any clients who have submitted offers without seeing it? or?
Yeah, so I have actually,
Oh, really?
because what we did is I told him, look, this is a situation. Fortunately, he had seen other properties in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so it goes back to that condo situation, right?
Yeah.
Condos are all, I mean, a lot of them are very similar, especially if you've seen other models. Now, if you have never seen it, you have no idea what it looks like, then it goes back to one, are you comfortable in doing this? And then number two, what is a competitive situation? Because uh, those are always the criteria that an individual need to make themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that from here in Boston, I mean, I find that I mean, I think that we're a little bit looser in terms of the showings. I mean, we can
Yeah.
still do private showings, you know, especially if it's a vacant property.
Right.
But I still find, I mean, as far as, you know, I know that nobody's putting an offer without seeing it. So, I mean,
Yep.
unless there is a contingent also, you know, based on seeing the properties after. So I
Mm-hmm.
find that people here, they still wanted to see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some condo association actually, I don't, it's interesting. I mean, I have a seller telling me that, you know, they're thinking about selling their condo, but their condo association says that they cannot show the property. Like,
Oh, wow.
so
Okay.
yeah, so I mean, I'm surprised even condo association can have such power to say no, we cannot do showings at all.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that. I mean, that's super hyper. That's hyper local in that case,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
very interesting.
exactly. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. I think the kind of covered from a showing perspective. What about from a marketing perspective? I mean, I talked a little bit about what I had to do, and how about your end? I mean, are you seeing people doing just more? I mean, you mentioned the Zoom, Zoom virtual open house kind of tours. Do you see people do more virtual staging, and do you see people doing more video tours than before, or does it feel kind of the same for now?
Oh yeah, I absolutely see people use the 3D like Matterport,
Yeah,
the 3D you know, floor plan a lot more, like
yeah,
a lot more. So, and those are the ones that actually really that's getting a lot of traffic. You know, I think that there's properties that doesn't have that. You know, when people are interested, it's a little slow in terms of generating the interest and traffic. But I find that the ones that are successful right now are the ones that have really nice pictures, you know, vacant,
mhm,
easy to show, and they have the 3D like Matterport.
yeah.
So, and yeah, so that's pretty important. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, it's the same for here. Like I did mine with Matterport. It gives them as much of a feel as possible. So at least it gives us the best chance. For right, obviously when you're selling it, you want a non-contingent offer. So it was a basic kind of thing that we had to implement and that we wanted to implement to get the highest chance.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so what are the current shelter in place guidelines right now in terms of when will things be lifted, at least at this stage, and then what do you kind of expect over the next few months in your area?
So, I mean, I think that it's still too early right now in Massachusetts. I mean, I look at the numbers of the coronavirus cases every
Mm,
day, right? Just to take a look and stay on track of where this is going. I feel like in Massachusetts, we're at the peak right now.
okay.
So, I mean, the rankings, I think that Massachusetts, the number of cases have surpassed California already.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So I'm looking at Massachusetts right now. It's like the third. I see like New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. So I think that it really picked up this week, and probably will be for the next week. I'm suspecting the numbers will probably come down beginning of May, and maybe this will be loosened up like mid-May. This is kind of, you know, my feel for it. Yeah.
Interesting. Mid-May.
What about you?
Yeah. So we have a shelter in place until I believe like May 3rd. Do I think it's likely to be extended? It It may be, but then I know the governor yesterday, I mean, over the last 2 days, they're working on a plan, and there's different like guidelines to meet to be able to start loosening it. Um, so I think it may be get extended more, but I think things will start opening up too, because I believe we are not at the peak anymore. And it's a lot of this because we had to shut down for much longer. And like, even from an open house perspective, ours is significantly more restricted than yours. So I
Mm-hmm.
think they did a very aggressive clampdown months ago, and
Mm-hmm.
that helps with the result now. But I know they're working on plans of, okay, well, how do restaurants operate? Like what needs to happen, what not needs to happen, what doesn't need to happen. So they're working on a lot of that right now. But they also mentioned that in the next 2 weeks, they'll look at the data again and then decide the protocol moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's the same thing for Massachusetts as well. So we're kind of still, I feel like we're still at the peak right now, but maybe things will be getting better. I think I was just reading this article this morning. They said that it has to be 14 days in a row, the number is to see the cases decrease for them to implement kind of the opening the phases.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
yeah, I think in Massachusetts we still have to wait a little bit. Yeah, we're still the
Got
third
it.
currently. But I do have, I'm still talking to a lot of, potential buyers, potential sellers every day. And I don't know about you, but I've been getting calls where, there's people out there, they're kind of like a panic call almost like, okay, what's going on, right? Like to the value of their property. And, what happens if they lose their job? What happens if they cannot pay their mortgage? So there's a lot of concerns out there. And I think that, I don't know what have you heard, what have you been hearing in terms of on the seller side, on the property owner side?
The sell side, I mean, people are curious, but
Mhm.
once they see the data and the information, then it's a matter of, like, I tell my sellers right now, like, if you're living in it right now, then I have to, like I mentioned, the protocol is different than vacant. If it's a vacant property, like, it's a very good time to list it right now, given how low inventory is and how many buyers are out there ready to go right now. Because you also don't know, well, you just really don't know what happens in the future. Like, if things really get a lot better, from a seller perspective, a lot of listings may come up. So then at that point depends on your strategy, and it also depends on the condition of your house. Like, if you're a fully remodeled house, then I think you'll be okay. But if you're, let's say original, or you haven't done much updates, now you're competing with all these other ones that hit the market. So, I mean, the prices are still, as very apparent, they're still very strong, if not even slight increase. A lot of the properties in the area are still getting multiple offers. So what are you waiting for from that perspective, right? Do you think things will get better? Or things may get more competitive?
Mhm.
So that's what I tell them, and it's up to them to make that call.
Here in the Boston market, it's quite interesting too because we have a lot of universities, right? So,
Mm,
I mean, all everybody's doing, the courses online for this semester, and there's still talks about whether to reopen for the fall or not. I know all summer classes are online as well here in Massachusetts. So, here being in an area where there's a lot of students, where investors have a lot of units that have student as tenants, it does create some concerns for landlords, not
right.
knowing, hey, are students coming back for the fall? Here, I would say probably 90% of the rental units have a September 1st cycle. So, I mean, I think that's a lot of concern for a lot of investors that, hey, is school going to reopen for September 1st? Are they going to have students who that wanted to come back to rent for September 1st?
Yeah.
So far, as far as I know, the school are planning to still reopen for the fall, but that's not confirmed yet. But that's one thing that I think that the Boston market is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I wanted to mention is that the Airbnb. I don't.
Oh,
I mean, yeah. So I mean, there's people who own Airbnb that got so many cancellations all of a sudden that their Airbnb place is empty. So I have this potential seller that they actually own a Airbnb. They've been running an Airbnb, and ever since that this new guideline came out, they got to sell because they just couldn't get anybody for Airbnb now. So I see a lot of people who are kind of switching from Airbnb either to a long-term rental or they end up, wanting to sell their property.
yeah, that's an interesting point. You're right. I mean, there's definitely, some people have made their whole math equation work because of the Airbnb model,
Hmm.
because generally it's a higher monthly amount versus a long-term tenant. And but with a significant lack of travel, at least depending on the area, like here in the Bay Area, it was mostly people traveling for work or other reasons that is greatly impacted here. Now, depending on the market, because depending on the market, there may be more Airbnb supply than others. If you look at it from a price point here, it wasn't like a cash, quote unquote, cash flowing area to begin with, at least in this county. But I can see for other areas that it was a cash flowing play, that you may have those sellers that might be panicking, or those sellers might be wanting to list their property now and get rid of it.
Yeah, I have a friend who's running an Airbnb, and usually she's getting a lot of traffic for graduations, right? Like people coming over to stay for graduations, and now the graduation's canceled, so there's no graduation. And and Airbnb have this policy where they have to refund 100%, of all their bookings. So I do see some Airbnb place, like I said, converted to long-term rentals, or ending up putting on the market. So that's a very interesting thing. And I do see another thing here in Boston, given, like I said, we have a really strong rental market, is that a lot of the tenants, because say if they have a lease term that's ending, August 31st, at this time they're trying to think about, staying at the same place instead of moving, because one, they don't know what's going to happen. And two is that, like, they don't want other people to see their place. So they end up just staying, and renewing their leases. So there's, less switching and, going back and forth with the rental market. That's what I'm seeing. So.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Like you mentioned before, this report wasn't with multifamily, but multifamily, it is a little bit early still, but the multifamily, investors or those landlords will clearly experience way more pain than others, mainly because of the demographics that got hit the most were renters, not necessarily homeowners. I'm sure homeowners get affected too, but the majority is the renter base. And so it is early now, but after 6 months or so, that data should be interesting related to the multifamily space. Yeah. So let's maybe wrap it up. In terms of any sort of summary, like anything that you want to share, or any guesses in terms of the market at this time, what's your crystal ball forecast of what's going to happen as we approach the end of the spring season?
Well, I think that in terms of, the overall showings and activities, is still slow right now. But I think that, my prediction is that, we could, in Massachusetts, we could slowly open up around mid-May. So that's kind of, where I'm seeing right now. And I do think people are holding off on a lot of properties from going on the market right now because of this. And I do think that, around end of May, I would say June, there are going to be more properties going on the market. And but that's going to be a slow, recovery. So, and I think that, on the investment side, I think that if the students confirmed that they will be back on campus September 1st, that's going to be a huge relief for a lot of landlords and investors, because, but then again, a lot of them are international students, or there's students from out of state. So there's still, even if for rentals, we used to don't need to do a lot of these, like, fancy, videos and pictures and all that. But now, because the students are actually not here present on campus now, they're abroad, they're out of state, and they need a rental place. And even all rentals, we need really good videos, 3D floor plans and all that. So I'm still hoping that, there's a decent amount of rental activities for the landlords, when we're getting to June, July. So
yeah. I mean, for me, I think from a marketing perspective, there's a lot more digital content that needs to be done these days. Like you mentioned, there's a lot more things that didn't need to be done in the past. Like you mentioned, the rentals, like, didn't need videos, and didn't necessarily need high quality photos, whatever it may be. So I think there's that one aspect. Here, I suspect things will likely actually stay the same. I think things will get even more competitive, quite frankly. As I mentioned, I've noticed even within my own network, buyers have been picking up in terms of people kind of getting back in. That one aspect. If I look at that data, the number of listings is the ones I wanted to sell are selling, and there's going to be very few left for people to choose from. So I think it's going to be interesting and competitive, but I think it's also a good opportunity because there's also less buyers than before that are looking. So I suspect that'll be the case until things really do clear up here, which I have no idea how long that will be. But I suspect it'll be kind of like this for a while. Hopefully it'll get a little bit better where it's a little bit easier to coordinate things. Like as I mentioned, right now we can only see vacant properties. So hopefully there's a process where we can see occupied properties. That would make things that would increase the amount of listings, but also increase the transaction velocity here. But that's kind of what I suspect that will slowly open up over the next few months.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. I mean, this is great. I mean, just to kind of see what's going on over there on the West Coast. So.
No, likewise. It's interesting because right now we're literally in our own bubbles, right? Because we barely leave our house, so we're in our own bubble right now. Like there's literally in our own bubbles, and it is interesting to see it and look at the other data of other markets, and also just how they're operating right now. And it seems like Boston, like things may be a little bit slower, but it doesn't seem like there's much change because of the aspect that you can still go see, properties that's owner occupied, which is good, which is very good.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm still hopeful. I mean, I think that I do think that there's going to be there's a lot of people on the sidelines. A lot of potential buyers and potential sellers sitting on the sidelines right now, and I'm still hopeful that there's going to be picking up in the spring. So once we get a little bit warmer weather, after all, we can go to the restaurants again.
No, I have a lot of VIP like client celebration dinners that have been delayed because of this. So as soon as that it clears up, then it's time to stimulate the local economy by going out and going to these restaurants because they need it, and we would love to do it. So, well, thank you so much for your inputs. This has been very, very helpful. I hope it's been helpful for the audience as well. And then this will all be recorded, so we can always send it out and give it to those that didn't have a chance to make it. But thank you so much again.
Okay, thank you, Spencer. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.